take projection.
It's Friday morning, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Alabama Slam podcast. I'm your host, Corey Hanna.
What's going on, guys? Patrick Akers.
And we have a very special guest with us tonight, today, whatever you want to call it, whenever you're listening. It's Mr. Cabana Man Dan. Dan, how's it going?
It's going very well. It's swimmingly, if you will.
Awesome. And we're glad to have you on, man. I was first introduced to your character in wrestling at the GCW Take a Picture in Huntsville a few months ago, and you put on a great show with Blake Christian that night. And Patrick, Patrick had known about you for a while, so we were talking. I was like, let's get some guests on, and you came up. So, yeah, man, we're just thankful to have you in for the night.
Oh, yeah. I'm always happy to join a wrestling podcast, especially with some local boys, and talk about the Alabama scene and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll probably talk quite a bit about that. I'm here in Huntsville now. I'm from the Shoals, and Patrick's from Russellville area and living over in Athens now. So I know Patrick's got a handful of questions. Patrick, if you want to get started, we'll get it moving.
Yeah, man. I guess first off, before we dig into anything else, let's go back to GCW in Huntsville there, that Take a Picture. When you got that call and figured out you were going to be on that show, and not only that, you're going to be wrestling a guy like Blake Christian, who is kind of blowing up on the indie scene now. Take me back to that moment. What was that like?
Well, the promoter and booker of Game Changer Wrestling is Brett Lauderdale. He's the mastermind of, head of that team. Well, basically, he had texted me and said, "Hey, are you going to be in the area?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "You going to be at the show?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "All right, well, bring your stuff. We'll have something for you." I was like, "Okay." And then I found out with everybody else at the same time on Twitter when they announced the match.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know who I was wrestling for Take a Picture yet, because they were trying to figure out that, and then the GCW versus New South show, they were trying to figure that out too, kind of at the same time. But they released that. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." I've known Blake for quite a while before he blew up, and then we've worked together a couple times before too. So it was nice.
Yeah, man. It was a banger for sure.
Oh, thank you.
What about coming out of that curtain? You got the hometown pop. What was that like for you?
Oh, dude, that was, it's moments like that I don't think I'll be able to forget in wrestling. Wrestling several times, all the time, like on the weekends and week in, week out, it all kind of blends together. But there are select moments where it's like walking out and just hearing the roar, being so psyched to be on pay-per-view, to be inside the Von Braun in front of a huge crowd, and they actually like make a reaction when you walk out. And this is Game Changer, and that's an international company. It's the biggest independent promotion in the world. And then here I walk out, and I got a very respectable appreciation. So that was cool.
Yeah, it's got to be even that too, because knowing a little bit about your history, you kind of went away from wrestling for a little bit, right? And then it came back into the scene. Was it 5-6 years ago?
Yeah. I came back in 2016. I started training in 2001 in Center, Alabama, in the back of an antique store in an old rickety 16 by 16 ring that was falling apart. And then I wrestled just Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, until about 2010, and then had like a nagging injury and took time off because the scene was whatever. And 2016 rolled around, New South had started up, Dump Sanders and several people on that team were people I came up with in the business, and they invited me to come check it out and do commentary, help out younger talent there. And I was like, wow, this is an awesome show. And the match that really inspired me to come back was the Carnies versus the Viking War Party and Roscoe Eat Lisa, I think. And it was just such a banger match, and just it brought the magic back to me. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to secretly get in shape, and I might come back for one more match, but it's going to be on my terms. And then for an upcoming show, John Wayne Murdoch had canceled to wrestle Christian Haim. And Doug Sanders said, "Hey, can you wrestle Chris this weekend?" I was like, "I haven't wrestled in 6 years." Like, "Oh, it'll be okay." So I had a match where I just was so rusty and all that. Like the crowd was like kind of turning on the match because I was just doing not so well. Because back in that day, it was like the crowd was like a weird smart mark NXT work rate kind of crowd, and they still are, but they weren't as forgiving now as they were back then. Or they're more forgiving now. So we were stinking. I was stinking it up, but I was concerned a couple days later that maybe I re-injured my neck or something like that. I just kind of held my breath for a couple days, and things were fine. And I just slowly got back into the scene and just started getting ridiculously busy in 2018, 2019.
It never leaves you, does it? That itch.
No, it's a love-hate relationship for sure.
Yeah, I only did it for like 2 years. So like I know Dump a little bit, and so Jeff Jameson was his ring name. Daniel Russell, I know him a little bit here in North Alabama. Yeah. So every once in a while, I'm like, shit, man, I'm feeling a little good. Maybe I got a butt. And then I go to pick up my kid, and I'm like, screw this. My bump card's already full. There's no way in hell. I'm so out of shape now from what I was. But yeah, so you're a guy, and I told you this at the GCW show, which is funny now that you're here on the podcast. I came up to you and was like, you gave me some advice at a show one time. I don't even remember where we were at, but you talked to me for like 10, 15 minutes. You were super polite, and of course you were on the North Alabama scene. You were a big name, so I'm glad that you were nice to me, or else it would make this conversation very weird right now if you were a dick. But you were one of the nicest dudes, and that's what I've heard across the board. Nobody's ever had a bad word to say about Cabana Man Dan. But like, where did the character come from? This Castaway character, because you grew up in Gaston. So where did this kind of come from? And of course, at some point, when did you know that the flip flop chop was going to be as over as what it is? Because people cannot wait for those things. They couldn't wait for it in Huntsville either.
Well, Cabana Man Dan is actually a name I used in backyard wrestling during the Attitude Era with friends from high school, because even though I'm in living in Gadsden, Alabama, I've got a Filipino heritage, so I definitely wanted to lean into some sort of like Islander, like surfer type of character when I first started like wrestling on a trampoline with friends. So it was a cool name, and Rob Van Dam was a huge star, and I like the three initials, CMD, RVD. I can't do anything that he can do, but it just rolled off the tongue, and it just kind of stuck. And from backyard wrestling, we would go to Movie Gallery and look at the wrestling tapes. And look at the wrestling tapes one night, the clerk there was like, "Oh, do you kids like wrestling?" We said, "Yeah." Well, there's a wrestling show. It just started up in Center, Alabama, and they mentioned training people. So, check that show out if you want to ask them about that. They're probably looking for more wrestlers. So we went to a show called Wrestling Christian Fellowship. It was in the back of an antique store in downtown Center, and we watched the first show, stuck around, looked for the person that looked like they were in charge, and asked them about wrestling. So, anyways, got trained, all that. I wore boots and all that for a long time. Not a long time. My idea of a long time is just, it varies. But I wore boots for a little while, and then I was tying them up in the back, and I went to cinch the laces, and the laces snapped, and it was like the whole locker room could hear it. It was like the bootlaces snapped around the world, and I was like, "Well, crap, what am I going to do?" And the promoter was Mad Dog Mansouri. He's like, "CMD, you're an Islander, just wrestle barefoot." So I was like, "Okay." So I started wrestling barefoot and ended up throwing those boots away and came out with the flip flops. And I never thought about hitting people with them. I would wear them out. I would kind of clap with them, get the crowd into it. They love doing that. And then I would taunt the opponent with them, but I'd never hit them because I never thought of that. So I was in a battle royal, and the flip flops were in the corner, and I owe this guy a lot. His name was Brian Sterling. He went to pick them up, and he rears back to hit somebody, and it was like the Matrix bullet time. I was like, oh my God, that is money. So he's got the flip flop, like wielding it, about to hit somebody. I like instantly go and cut him off and just kick him and take the flip flops away from him. And I just start wailing on everybody else. And that's how the flip flop chop was born, was in a battle royal. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And that was like 2005, 6, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, like on this podcast, about like the chop in wrestling and how like psychologically that's like the one move that fans know what it feels like to get hit with something, because everybody's kind of done it at some point at their house. And so to just have that about your character and have it incorporated with a flip flop is just, I mean, you heard it in Huntsville. People go ape shit when that thing pops off. And then it even gives such a good thing for the heel to kind of play off of, right? We even saw it in that match you had with Blake, right? Being the heel, he takes it away. You know, you try at the beginning match. It's just such a good, simple thing that makes sense all around. I love when like pro wrestling has little moments like that.
Oh yeah. And if I just went out there and just, as soon as the bell rang, started hitting him with it, it's like I've wasted a huge piece of my character with no build, and I immediately got the payoff. It's like, well, what else can I do? What else am I going to pop for? I mean, you're at Game Changer Wrestling. There's people going through tables. There's light tubes. There's flips. There's a million super kicks. Like, just fantastic stuff. It's like, if I were to do that at the beginning, nothing I do will peak any higher than that. So it's like, I've got to like save it. I've got to build up to it, and I got to make it mean something. And I don't know if that's a taught thing these days when folks are going to wrestling school or when they think about what they want to do in a match. But I just try to build the stuff, because if it doesn't mean anything, and it's like, what's the point of doing it?
So how have you seen, let's talk about that a little bit then, because you said you started 2006, 2007. I mean, my gosh, just the in-ring style, it's almost completely different in 2023 than what it was back then. How have you kind of seen it change? And are there some things on the indie scene that you think have changed for the better in terms of the in-ring style? And are there a couple of things that you wish, like, you know, you mentioned building to stuff. Do you wish that maybe guys took their time a little bit more, or maybe kind of built up to a certain moment in the match instead of just letting it all fly out right at the beginning?
I definitely agree with that. If you were to say, if you saw MJF's tweet the other day about how bangers don't pay the hospital bills, that kind of thing, did you see that?
Yeah.
Tweet? I mean, that's just like the indie mindset. It's like banger, 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 banger. Well, if every match on the card is a banger, 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 did you really have a banger if every match is exactly the same as yours? Because nothing was built up. But anyways, I can go all Jim Cornette about stuff, but no, but back in the day, I mean, whenever I was coming up, you know, in the mid 2000s, you had the TNA X division, you had Ring of Honor, so that was already kind of ahead of its time. And being in the South and Alabama and Georgia particularly, there wasn't people working that light heavyweight style or the X division style or cruiserweight style or Ring of Honor style. So whenever I would get into matches with folks kind of with the same mindset, we would attempt to do, you know, stuff like that. So it's been around for a long time. It's just whenever I started, it just a lot of people will say that me and some other folks like Christian Haim and even like Jeff Jameson were kind of pioneers in that quote unquote Ring of Honor style in Alabama, when IWA Deep South was actually good and had like Eddie Kingston, Mike Quackenbush, Claudio Castagnoli, and all these guys coming to Alabama. And, you know, anyways, that's pretty much the long and short of that. You know, it's always kind of been there, but now it's like everybody's seen it a million times at this point versus back then it was kind of new.
Well, now even like, you know, with IWTV and stuff like that, you know, New South, you know, you guys have the action class thing. Now independent wrestling is just so much more prevalent and in front of so many more eyeballs than what it was back in the day, right? I mean, because you could, You went to an indie show, it was just the only people that saw that match were the people that were there in the house. And now, these clips, they get put on Twitter all over the place. I mean, how has that changed?
Oh gosh.
I'm sure a lot, right? Difference
Oh,
between
a lot.
playing
Like
to the
I used
house,
to have
playing
to,
to the camera.
yeah, I used to have to carry. I mean, like you wouldn't have film of your matches. You don't know, how to improve, or you wouldn't be able to see what you did to maybe do it differently next time. So, I was whenever I was coming up, I would bring my own camcorder with a tape and a tripod. So I would go and get somebody to start recording my match, and then after the match, I would sneak out and turn it off, and then I'd at least have the footage of my matches to later make like a compilation tape or to make a VHS tape to hand to promoters. Yes, I had to do that back in the day. I've handed my tape to people. I've mailed my tape. So it's way easier now.
Yeah, and then you see these guys. It's so much easier for them to get traction, right? Talking about New South, the guy Hunter Drake just had himself a hell of a weekend. He was all over Twitter this past weekend with the double Spanish fly off the top like that. What's it like now to kind of be part of this scene in Alabama, especially here in North Alabama, as it's kind of having this revitalization, right? People like Kenzie Page, Hunter Drake, and I know I'm missing Dylan McQueen. There's a lot of names that I'm missing now that have kind of started here that have spread out to other parts of the country in the indie world. What is it like now to be a part of it and see it come back the way it has?
Man, it's really nice because, it was the dark ages for a really long time that, week in, week out, we were busting ass for nothing. It's like Alabama was kind of a joke, or the Southeast was kind of a joke, and everything was like, the Northeast scene is where you got to be. If you want to make it, you got to go up there, and you got to wrestle in Philly and New York and all this stuff. It's like, it doesn't really matter now. You can, as long as you have a product that people are wanting to watch, you could be doing this like in Alabama or Mississippi or whatever. So it's like,
yeah,
it kind of levels the playing field. But I think another thing, it kind of floods the market to where it's like, how many streaming services are there now? How many shows there are now? It's like, and it's like, look at mainstream wrestling, and it's like, AEW is going to add another TV show. And it's like, people only have so much time in a day. So that's the concern, is it's very saturated right now. I mean, it's a good problem. It's like, it's too much wrestling, but it's even harder to stand out now because of all the different ways that people can watch.
Almost every night of the week. I used to have that problem with devoting time to football, because football went from mostly Saturdays and Sundays to, well, then there were Thursday, obviously the Monday night games, and then there's Thursday night games, and then when you get to playoffs, you got NFL Saturday when the college games aren't on and all that stuff. And then when I got into wrestling a few years ago, I started out just in WWE because AEW wasn't a thing, and I didn't know any different about other things. So I would watch back then. Monday night was Raw, and then Tuesday was SmackDown, and then SmackDown went to Friday. And I started watching AEW, and then there's, they add Rampage and so on and so forth. And I'm kind of in the same situation now. Like there's a it's kind of stretched thin, but I've also, with Vince returning, pondered maybe not watching as much WWE and picking up like a Ring of Honor subscription or something. Like there's it's a lot of options, but it's a good problem to have, I think. So yeah, I mean, you bring up interesting points though. It's like, you kind of, do you want to pick and choose what you watch, or how do you spend your time?
If you were like a brand new fan that's never watched wrestling before, it's like, just the amount of choice is almost to where it's like, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know what's what. It's like, how do you appeal? How does all this wrestling appeal to trying to get new fans? I think that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, especially at a company like AEW that I think is struggling with right now, is how do you pull more people into this tent? Because we talk about all the time in this podcast, it can't just be the wrestling. That's never been what's drawn a lot of people into the art of wrestling. Even if you think about some of your favorite moments in wrestling, there's not a lot of them that are matches, right? It's Austin in the beer truck. It's Mick Foley getting thrown off at the sail or stuff like that. So like, yeah, I think that's the struggle with now is with so much content out there, not just in wrestling, but man, there's every TV show that's ever been made is out there on a streaming service to watch. How do you get these eyeballs to come into to wrestling? Yeah, it's a thing that a lot of companies I think are dealing with.
Yeah, and I think as far as on the independent level, it's just the way to build. I mean, you're going to have your core fan base and you're going to have your people online, but to get everybody, you have to go out to them. You have to physically talk them into the building. You have to hand them a flyer. You have to give them a reason to come. And it's just, it's crazy.
Yeah, Patrick and I brought a buddy to the Huntsville GCW show we tried to get him to watch a wrestling show with us when we were on a work trip in Pensacola a few months before that. And it was the night that Hangman Page got injured versus Moxley. And so it was a weird night to try to introduce him to wrestling, but we brought him to GCW and he was like hooting and hollering by the end of the night. He was having a big time.
Well, it's also, it'd probably be easier to get into like a one-off show, kind of like that Game Changer wrestling show where it's just like matches. It's easy to get introduced to people because they're kind of in a vacuum versus going to a television taping where it's like, well, who's this guy? And why are they mad? Mm-hmm. And it's night and day.
Patrick, were you going to say something or?
Oh, I was just going to say that, like, yeah, the big thing too is like people who've never watched wrestling before, it's kind of hard to get them to get into it through a TV screen. But when you take them there live, especially, that's why when I heard GCW's coming to Huntsville, I was like, dude, we have to go to this one. We have to get a couple beers in us and we got to go fucking stand beside the thing. And what he was amazed by was just the athleticism, right? And I know that pro wrestling has dealt with this stigma before in the past. Not so much, I don't feel like in modern day, but wrestling being fake and people just writing it off because of that. But I think what, bringing our buddy in who's never watched it before, immediately within the first match, which was a scramble match, just a perfect way to open the show. Dudes are flying all over the place. The athleticism that's there inside the ring, he immediately was enthralled by it. And then his first holy shit, which we tweeted this to Hunter Drake, when Hunter Drake hit the Spanish fly off the top, he let out an audible holy shit, which was his first ever holy shit he's ever done in wrestling. So kudos to Drake out there for busting our kids holy shit cherry when it comes to wrestling. So we'll have to bring him back. I think they said they were coming back in June, so we'll have to bring our buddy back in June. Yeah. But I mean, that is a good way, especially when you get kids, right? I think one thing that New South does really well, a family-friendly show. There's a lot of kids, and that's how you make new fans, is you get them when they're young, and then, they have these memories. I have memories of going to wrestling matches with my grandmother, and that's how you build up a new generation of fans, and then you hope along the way, I think, that you can pull some more of those people in. That's just been that's what I found has always worked best. Yeah,
and that's one thing the WWE does really, really, really well is capture the young fan, whether it's just the presentation or the fact that they're PG, and it's easier for them to get involved, and it's easier for parents to let their kids watch it. Like, wrestling shouldn't be for kids, but your kids should be able to watch it. So that's kind of like the flip side that you do. And it's like, yeah, especially with like independent wrestling, that a lot of the times you have to appeal to kids and families. And, I know New South, when they got into bed with GCW, it's like the Florence shows, there's beer there. So it's like, let's be a little bit edgier. But the next week we've got a fundraiser show at a high school. So it's like, let's scale this back. So it's kind of like, you got to know who your crowd is, who you're wrestling for. So it's just being smart about it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no Nick Gage at the fundraiser show. No, he's DK all day.
Yeah. He's not doing the church show in Woodstock, Alabama with me.
No, although that would be a hell of a show. If Nick Gage was to do, did you see Nick Gage on a poster and it just is like Woodmont Baptist Church? You'd be like, holy shit, what is this about to be?
As long as he's wrestling Action Mike Jackson, it'll be great.
There you go.
Yeah. Speaking of, like, for kids, they get you can walk into any toy aisle and find action figures for WWE, and now even AEW's got action figures and stuff out too. I remember, when I was a kid watching Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and stuff, action figures were a big thing. Even back in the let's say early to mid '80s. I don't want to date myself too much, but yeah, I mean that's another factor there. That's kind of interesting is the marketing side of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird that AEW is marketed to kids too, even though it's a little more rated R than the WWE. But speaking of the all ages stuff, I got. I don't want to tell too much of a story here, but my son is 23. He looks a little younger than that. And you may know Corey Ron Forrester. Do you know?
Yeah, I met him.
Corey.
I got introduced to him by like 6 different people at that night. I was like, yes, I met him. And then like I'd walk off and someone would bring me. It's like, hey, this is Corey Ron Foster. I was like, yeah, I just met him.
Yeah, he was there at the show, and I had him on my an old podcast I used to do, and he walked by, and Patrick and I had started back by the curtain with our buddy and my son, and by the end of your match, we were like, fuck it, we're on the wrong side. We got to get on the hard cam side. So we walked over to the hard cam side, and Corey walked up, and we were chatting, and he was like, anybody want a beer? Anybody need a beer? I'm going to the line. And he asked like 3 different people, and we were all like, no, I think we're good right now. And I turned, I was like, I bet my son would take one. And he kind of looked for a second, and then he walked off, and he came back with a beer, and he's like, did I just commit a felony? And I was like, no, man. I was like, he's 23. I was like, he doesn't look that old, but I was like, he's fine. But yeah, big fun at the GCW. The experience there was great. And I know you guys have some Huntsville shows, or you've got some Huntsville shows coming up soon on your dates in June, it looks like.
Yeah, we got June 22nd is going to be a show, I think before the Trash Pandas baseball game, like it's pro wrestling night.
Sweet.
And then the GCW show is the 24th on Saturday, and then they'll do the GCW versus New South 2 on Sunday in Florence.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a buddy text me earlier and was like, hey, GCW versus New South in Florence on so-and-so date. So I just happened to glance at your dates earlier and saw 2 Huntsville shows and got excited. And I didn't know which promotions those were with.
Oh, they're all New South or Game Changer.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you're all over the place, like Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and then even some dates up north coming soon. I mean, because I've been in a band and have toured some. Like, what's the experience like going to places like that where you might not know as many people, but I guess at this point you probably know enough people along the way that you could call friends.
I mean, it just depends. I mean, it's like you never know what you're going to get. Like sometimes it's like you'll be on the same shows with people in the South, and then you'll go up to another place. So like, oh, there's Effie, there's Alley Cap, there's Alan Angels and AC Mac, or just somebody, something like that. And then you'll go to like another show, and it's like nobody knows who you are, and you don't even know who the guy that you're wrestling. So it's just fun like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Patrick, did you have follow-ups on any years?
Nah, I was just gonna ask, like, what are you digging in modern day wrestling? Like, what kind of story, either in WWE or AEW, that do you think is kind of popping off right now and has your interest?
Well, I'm going to be basic and say the Bloodline storyline was amazing, and the whole from the start of it to at least WrestleMania, it's been fantastic. I mean, it's like,
should Cody have won? Should Cody have won?
Yes.
Okay, good. We would have to kick you off the podcast if you had said no.
He should have won. That was like a big wind out of my sails that night. And then everybody's like, this, you never finish the story. The story keeps going. It's just another chapter. I was like, okay, whatever. That's just whatever. And then the next night on Raw, it's like, and then Brock Lesnar returns for no reason. I was like, I just rolled over. But I'm a WWE guy just because I have easier access to it with Hulu and the network and Peacock. I keep track with AEW on Twitter and social media clips and what people are talking about, just because I don't really have a way to watch it. So,
gotcha. Yeah, speaking of bringing people in, leading up to WrestleMania, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, and anybody that's new, my wife basically got interested in wrestling in the last month or two leading up to Mania because of the Bloodline story. But that's ultimately not the thing that has hooked her. It was Rhea Ripley and Judgment Day.
Yeah.
That caught her attention. Yeah. So, it's interesting to see what appeals to different people. Like, between me and my wife's boss talking to her about wrestling all the time, she was like, well, that sounds interesting. And it was just the story aspect of it, right? So it's interesting to see people come into it, because I've only been watching it again for a few years. So there's still things that fly over my head. Like last night on AEW, I had no idea who the hell Roderick Strong was because he hasn't been on WWE in forever that I can remember. And I've never really watched NXT but a few times. So, just seeing wrestling bring in somebody like her. And then she watched the Monday Night Raw the night after without me because I was out doing something else. And when I got home, she's like, what the hell happened? She was like telling me about the Lesnar and turning on Cody situation and so on and so forth. And like, she was all in. It was kind of awesome and funny to see at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like somebody that goes brand new into it. They like that story and all that because they can relate to that. It's like, had you started off with just like, some sort of crazy lucha libre spot fest ladder match, it's like, it's almost too much. It's like you got to work your way to that, I think.
Yeah, it's like watching art house films.
Yes.
It's like you give somebody like a foreign film, people are like, what the fuck? I ain't watching this. I got to read while I'm watching a movie. What the hell? But you watch enough, eventually, like, you get snobbish about it, like what probably I've gotten, which is why my wife finds me insufferable when it comes to movies, and we can't pick anything. So we just scroll Netflix for 3 hours and then we go to bed.
Yep. I think that's just about every like married couple these days. Like we'll just get on Netflix and what do you want to watch while we eat? And we just like, by the time we pick something out, we've already done eating. And it's like, okay, well, let's just go to bed.
Yeah, that's it. That's why The Office was always so popular for people. I never watched it, but people always just be like, oh, I'm just scrolling, don't know what to watch. Screw it. I'll watch The Office.
That's still what we go to bed to most nights.
Yeah.
That or, a couple of different sitcoms will kind of rotate out when we get tired of one or the other.
Yeah.
So as a wrestler, what do you think about a show like AEW All Access that is showing behind the scenes and opening up the, behind the scenes world to everybody that, that doesn't maybe necessarily keep up with wrestling, but they might flip through and see it on and what, just in kayfabe in general, what do you think about something like that? I mean, kayfabe is dead with the internet basically anyway, but what are your opinions on a show like that these days?
I mean, it's a way to get people invested in the people behind the characters because, I mean, in AEW, a lot of them aren't really characters, they're wrestlers. And if you just get to know them, maybe that can be kind of a crutch if they don't have like a big character on screen. Well, now you just get to know them as a person. And that way you can care about them that way. I mean, I'm fine with it because, I mean, if you go on Wikipedia and look up wrestling, you can get every insider term and in the world. It's on Wikipedia now. So it's like, it doesn't, I mean, yeah, it's dead, like kayfabe wise, but it's like, I don't want to take a piss on it either. But it's like, I try to uphold it as much as I physically possibly can. It's like, if you see me after a match, I'm limping around. And that might be for real because I'm old, but it's also to pay a respect to, going out there wrestling a 15-minute match. I shouldn't be just like doing jumping jacks. I'm tired. Right. So it's like, I think, just try to like people, it's like people go to a movie knowing that the movie's not real, but at the same time, they don't, it's like, they don't want to see the guy like take the mask off and it's like, oh, this is just a person inside this transformer. But no, I mean, as far as like an all access show, I mean, I think that's cool. I mean, they used to have WWF Confidential and, there's, if you're that type of fan that wants to keep up with that behind the scenes stuff, it's perfect for you. It might not be for an average WWE fan, but these days it's like, there's more drama outside the ring than inside the ring that you want to keep up with. So It's just
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to get that
Gotcha.
drama in the ring to where people want to watch that versus, just internet innuendo.
This dude's getting bit in the locker room backstage now.
Yeah, that
Fist
should have
fight.
been.
Have you ever seen any kind of crazy fist fight? Any kind of like, you got to name specific, but have you ever seen anything crazy? Has anybody ever bit anybody? First of all, I guess that's a wild.
I've never seen that before. I mean, I've seen
never
scouting
seen- yeah.
contests. I've seen shoving. I've never actually seen anybody like throw hands in the locker room, but there's been words.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta really escalate a situation to bite a motherfucker on the thing. that is. We talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast when the brawl out happened. That was the thing that I was just like, somebody bit somebody. I would always have to, and I said on the podcast, I would have to fight somebody else after the fact if they bit me during a fight. It's almost like not the end of it.
They probably just need better catering or more food at AEW, and you don't have to worry about people biting.
There you go. Yeah. Well, it's funny what I was going to bring up. You were mentioning kayfabe. I think modern day kayfabe, that's what makes a guy like MJF so compelling, I think, is because he just refuses. He's almost the most respectful wrestler of all time because he is living in this world where all these wrestling fans know every single insider term, and they know all the men and the women behind these characters. But he is just going out there being like, I refuse to present you anything other than wrestling which you love. I'm going to be this character. You see me in the hotel lobby, I'm going to cut you off on the elevator. There's people posting clips like that on Twitter. You come to a meet and greet, you're going to pay $50. I'm going to flip you off. Like, it's wild that he's getting away with it. And it could only work in modern day, right? Because if this was 1982 Memphis, some grandma would have already stabbed him in the gut by now, and that would have been the end of it. So it's kind of wild, the modern day kayfabe, and how, I think that's what makes MJF one of the best going right now in terms of characters in wrestling, just because he's the ultimate character, right? He's not dropping it in a world where everybody else has long since dropped the act.
Yeah, he almost dropped it a little bit last night on All Access, and then he got right back into it. It's like you could kind of tell when the switch went on, and he's like, "Oh shit, I was a little too nice to somebody."
Yeah, and he has to be such a cool dude backstage, or else there's no way people would let you get away with saying some of the stuff you would say.
Yeah.
If it's your boy, then it's a different story. But yeah, if he was an asshole backstage, people, none of that stuff would fly.
Right. So one of my questions that I have for you is, what do you do in your downtime when you're not wrestling?
Oh, well, I mean, like a typical day is during Monday through Friday. I wake up at 4:00 in the morning. I go to the gym. I get home. I fix a quick breakfast for my wife, coffee. Get our daughter to school with her, and I just work. I only have time for pretty much working out and wrestling, and then trying to make sure our daughter gets to dance practice, ballet practice, musical theater practice, drama.
Yeah, man.
She's busier than I am, and she's 10. So
I remember those days. Just, you're basically a transport service.
Yeah.
Taxi service.
I wish I had hobbies because I don't consider wrestling to be a hobby. I'm passionate about working out. And I do all sorts of odd jobs and whatever I could do to make money. My wife's a teacher, so she's the sugar mama, I guess, and she's got the insurance and the benefits, and I just do random contracting jobs and whatever I can do.
Yeah, that's my life right now. Is I quit my job. Patrick and I worked across the hall from each other up until early January, and I quit. And my wife I got on her insurance when she got the good insurance about a year ago, and had been looking for a reason to get out of my job. So I'm a contractor at this point for videography and editing and stuff. So yeah, I'm at the house basically editing and trying to promote this podcast here and there when I find the time to sneak away from the computer long enough to do it. But we did have, I should have thought of this earlier, and I thought it was a little late in the afternoon by the time I did it, but I sent out a tweet asking for people if they had any questions for you. what would they be? And one of the responses we got was from the Fight Boys at Fight Boys Show on Twitter, and they asked the proper technique for a solid flip-flop chop. And you answered it on Twitter, but for those that might not have heard it on Twitter, if you want to give your response.
So basically what I replied to him was, you just want me to give this powerful and dangerous knowledge for the general public away for free. And then I tweeted out a gif of Uncle Ben with great power comes great responsibility. But no, I mean, there are techniques to a good flip-flop chop. It starts with a good flip-flop,
Yeah.
My favorite
You can't just use
I don't
any old flip-flop.
like my least favorite flip-flops to use are the flip-flops whenever Old Navy has the dollar flip-flop sale. Because they're not very big. They're flimsy, but not flimsy enough. So it's just kind of like whatever. And even their larges, for some reason, they don't have a lot of surface space. So I get like kind of like the weakest sound out of that one. And my favorite for a long, long time were the generic foam flip-flops from Hobby Lobby. Just the Hobby Lobby brand, made in China, all foam with just the plastic thong part on it. Those motherfuckers sounded like a damn shotgun blast. And
That's interesting.
And the only thing that would suck about them, other than they would sting, is that they would have like on the bottom of the foot where there's like the thong part where it's inserted, it would leave like a round little hole, a round mark on somebody, and it looked like a cigar burn. But the flip flops I use now, I genuinely feel bad hitting people with them, and I need to get some nicer flip flops to use. Like when I did the switch to the Castaway character, I went out and got real thick leather flip flops with a nice sole on them. Because I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to be a serious wrestler. I wanted to go out and have good technical matches with hard-hitting strikes without the flip-flops. Because it's like, for years and years, everybody's seen me hit people with flip-flops. But I want to show them I can really, really go. So these flip-flops are like shoot flip-flops. They were like $20 flip-flops, and they hurt. So I feel bad hitting people with them. And they don't even make as good a sound as the cheap Hobby Lobby ones. So I usually tell them, I was like, I'm sorry in advance. These may suck, but it's the worst thing I'm going to hit you. It's the worst thing I can do to somebody. Everything else is, it's not going to be that bad.
What's the best flip-flop chop you've ever hit? Is there one that just stands out when you think about flip-flop chops? You're like, oh man, I got somebody good one time.
Yeah. Back at Pro South Wrestling, it's a weekly Friday night show in Piedmont, Alabama. There was a big guy in the ring. There's like a group of people. It was the left hand path. It was like your dark gothic guys, and they were beating up somebody, and baby faces came in to make the save. I run out, and this is when I used to come out with like a coconut cup, not the one that I wear now, like that's a real coconut, but like this one's just like a big hard plastic coconut cup. So I run out. I like throw the coconut, and it hits one of the bad guys like square in the head. It's like a Mario fireball. I hit him with that. It goes donk. I slide in the ring, and I don't know if you're familiar with Austin Towers. He's like a legit 7 foot tall wrestler out of Georgia, and he's got just a huge chest, and I was just wailing on him, and it was so loud. It was incredible. And there's so many really, really good ones throughout the years. And there were all those Hobby Lobby flip-flops. Those were the best ones.
That's so weird. I would figure the expensive ones with like leather and shit would be like would give the most pop, but you said it's the cheap ones. You said the leather ones hurt obviously more, but the cheap ones are there for the popping.
Yeah, those are the working flip-flops, not the shoot flip-flops. And I don't know, maybe it's because they're lighter. I can swing them harder. It like breaks the sound barrier.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that thing was loud in Huntsville. So like we said, you've been in the ring with Blake Christian, Tony Deppen, Mance Warner. Give us a guy or a girl who you've been in the ring with where as you got 2 minutes into the match, you're like, oh, this person's different. This person is on another level.
It's funny that you bring up some previous people. I actually made a list of. I was working out, and it was like right around my birthday when I turned 38. I was like, man, I don't know how much longer I can go with this. I'm getting older, but I wanted to reflect on some of the people I've been in the ring with. So let me pull that out to kind of remind myself. Okay, let's see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. It's just in my workout notes for glute day. Hold on. Nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. This is good radio here. Me searching for my iPhone notes.
Yeah, this is what we do.
Okay, here we go. I made like probably like as far as someone like that I got in the ring with was like, yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready. Oh shit, I'm not ready. Are you familiar with Fred Yehai?
Yeah,
he was a very intense dude, and I was not ready for him. But no, it's crazy just looking at, I've wrestled Ricochet, Wardlow,
Oh wow,
Chuck Taylor,
nice.
Scott Steiner was a wild one.
Wow.
Do you got a Scott Steiner story?
I do, man. Like, this was WrestleMania week in 2019. I'm at the Airbnb and I get a Facebook call. And I was like, what? Who calls me on Facebook? And it was a dude that was that worked for AIW Wrestling, Absolute Intense Wrestling. He's like, hey, are you near the venue? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, come on down. I was like, okay, we got something for you. I was like, okay, great. When you get to the building, report to Hornswoggle and Scott Steiner. You're in their match. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, it's like, why would I be there? Why would you need me for this? So the story of that match was it was Scott Steiner versus Hornswoggle, but like the day before, Scott Steiner called the bookers like, we need another midget. We need a midget for Hornswoggle to beat up so he can shine up on a midget, and then I can beat him up and like take revenge or whatever, something like that. So it's like they couldn't find a midget, but they knew a really short guy. So they called me up, and I'm just like, I walk through the alley. I see Hornswoggle sitting in a chair. I'm like, hey, I'm Cabana Man Dan. They told me to get with you. And he's looking at me up and down. He's like, how tall are you? And that's the very first thing he says. Like, how tall are you? I was like, I'm 5'3". He goes, oh shit, you're too tall. Scott Steiner's going to be pissed. He's going to kill me. I was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, we needed to get another midget for me to throw around. And then he was going to come out and do something. I was like, okay, well, you didn't get that. You got me. So it was just like one of the most surreal nights of my life, just sitting in the locker room with Scott Steiner, freaking legend. And you don't know how he's going to be because you assume he's just an insane madman. And he was not. He was really, calm and cool and just kind of stoic in a way. But I was just sitting in the corner of like almost like a closet-sized dressing room with these two guys. And then when we get out to the match, Hornswoggle says, I need a warm-up match. And then my music plays. And then they're like, wow, it's Cabana Man Dan. So Hornswoggle beats me up. He's got me in the Steiner recliner. Scott Steiner comes out and makes the save. But for some reason, that makes me mad. I get back into the match. So Scott Steiner's giving me belly-to-belly suplexes. And like something I missed a cue or something. And then Scott Steiner is looking at me. He's like, get in the ring, motherfucker. I was like, oh no, I'm scared. And then like I get thrown around a little bit more. And then I look out of the corner of my eye and Scott Steiner's got a chair and he's raising it over his head over me. I was like, well, here's where I die. So I took a chair shot from him too. It was fine. And no, it was great, man. But yeah, that was that.
You're at that part in your career where you could look back on that list and have some like just crazy stories, just some pinch me moments, right? Fucking Scott Steiner and Hornswoggle. I mean, you mentioned Ricochet, Wardlow. These are guys that are, on big time on TV now. What do the next couple of years look like for you? What are your aspirations in wrestling going forward? Because you mentioned you're 38. You said you don't have many more years left. So what's the next level look like for you aspirationally?
Well, I would like to eventually transition into a trainer. or like a coach or producing wrestling. I really try to go out of my way and work with guys still in training to work on basics, and like, especially lately, like I try to have live matches in crowd with, like normal crowds, normal shows, but I try to put myself with somebody much younger in the business than I am. That way they can get a quality match, a quality learning experience, and a quality test of their abilities with somebody that's been in wrestling for 20 years. And that's just, people want to wrestle me because of that, because I can help them think outside of a box and tell a story. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to rough up a greenhorn or anything like that. Like I'm in there to leave wrestling better now than when it was in 2001. And I was told, like when I was 32 or 31, that my window was closing already. And it's like 6 years later, it's like I'm still kind of trying to tap on the window, like, hey guys, I'm still here. And after I had a match a few years ago, WrestleMania week, where after the match aired, I got a message from a WWE talent scout, and it was like, hey, that was a great match. It's probably the best one of the weekend we saw so far. I want to get, some information from you. I was like, okay, here it is. Here's the excitement. It's like I'm nervous, sweating bullets or whatever. He's like, first off, can you tell me how old are you? What's your age and how tall are you? I was like, oh, great. My two biggest weaknesses. So I was like, I gave myself an inch. I said, I'm 5'4" and I'm 36. It's like, okay. And nothing else happened. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, I've got some interesting opportunities. I'm not going to be that guy that's going to be contracted to the developmental deal. I've developed as much as I possibly could, probably, as far as that goes. Like I'm not a long-term investment for somebody, but as far as like an active competitor, I think my strength and my passion is driving me in other directions. I still love going out there. I mean, you see my schedule. I'm wrestling in big towns and towns that don't even have a stoplight. I don't care. It's like I kind of want to be that Mike Jackson type guy where it's like I'm 73, but yeah, I'm still wrestling because fuck it.
Yeah.
And
he was out there with Marco Stunt.
Oh, dude, I go out of my way to make sure I work more shows with Mike Jackson just to get part of that wrestling history. Like there'll be at least one thing I could take away from Mike Jackson each time I work his show, because he'll either tell a story about territory days or he'll be like, yeah, let me tell you about the time I wrestled Lou Thez. And it's like, I've wrestled Mike Jackson and he's wrestled Lou Thez. So it's like 6 degrees of separation to Lou Thez. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Even with Mike Jackson, man, you see it like at the GCW show, like our buddy was like, who's this old dude? But then 4 minutes in, because Mike Jackson's selling and he's such a fucking good showman, the dude's like, oh shit.
Oh yeah.
No, well, let's go, old man. Come on, whip his ass. Yeah. So that's wild. Yeah. It's the good thing is the flip-flop chop, you can do that son of a bitch in your 70s, right?
Bingo.
That'll never not be over.
Yeah, I don't have to walk the top rope like Mike Jackson does. I can just hit somebody with a shoe.
Yeah. And get a huge pop. Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to like talk about before we get out of here for the day?
Yeah, I'm going to give a quick shout out to my buddies at Virtual Basement. They're the makers of the currently in alpha production, I guess that might be the terminology, of a wrestling video game called The Wrestling Code. And it's supposed to be coming out at some point on next gen consoles and computer and stuff. And it's mostly independent wrestlers, legends, people that aren't with us anymore, but it's just got it's just a conglomerate of just professional wrestling in a game. And, check them out on Twitter. It's Virtual Basement. And if you check out some of my social media, especially on my TikTok, I've got some of my motion capture work that I've done where I'm hitting the Bonsai Pipeline Code Red. And then I'll be going up there at the end of May to finish up my motion capture at the Wrestling Federation of America promotion last Saturday of June. So there you go. Shout out there.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. How'd that come about?
Well, I think it was Anthony Green, who was August Gray in NXT. or O'Shea Edwards. One of those two guys, or both of them, were like, hey, it'd be really cool if you could get Cabana Man Dan in this game because he's got a great character. He's got a great look. He hits people with flip flops. I think it'd be awesome for your game. And he's a really super nice guy, super pro. And, he's a guy that deserves that kind of spot, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's definitely not my word.
Well,
So.
at this rate, it could be out before the AEW game, Fight Forever.
Yeah, they'll beat it to it.
I'm not much of a gamer, but I've talked to my son about us getting it and playing it, and that may end up being out before that game.
It very well could be, and there's only like a small handful of people because it's an independent studio making it.
Yeah,
but they've made really big games before. Like I think it's an Army Man game, and then a first-person RPG called Ark, and I think that was a big deal for a while.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, man, tell everybody where they can find you. I know you've got, it looks like the next 2 months are pretty damn solid for you on the thing that I saw yesterday or today, I guess, when you posted all your dates.
Yeah.
Just tell everybody where to find you, track you down.
Well, we'll go ahead and we'll just go with social media first because that's the best way. Twitter is Cabana Man Dan, Cabana Man Dan on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. I've actually got on TikTok, but it's cabana.man.dan on those two platforms. And that's probably the best way to reach out to me. If you're wanting information about any of the shows coming up, cabanamandan@gmail.com. That's the good thing about having such an outrageous name. Is like, normally people don't have it.
Yeah. Well, I followed your link tree the other night and you had the highlights from Take a Picture on there. And I was like, I really got to go back and watch that whole match at some point. Because I watched the highlights and just got all hyped up. And I got excited for seeing you guys again here in the not too distant future. I want to get over to one of those Florence shows one of these days because I still know a bunch of people over there. But if it's a lot easier when you're 45 to just go down the street a few minutes and then be back home and in bed within 15 minutes.
Oh, it must be nice. It's like these last times we went to Hamburg, Pennsylvania for American Excellence Wrestling. It's like I'm driving to Chattanooga to pick up Aaron Wade and Jaden Newman. And then we drive to Bowling Green, Kentucky to meet up with Derek Neal and Tony Evans. And then from Bowling Green, Kentucky, we drive to Hamburg, Pennsylvania. And then it's like, as soon as we get into wrestling, we get to do it all over again. And I get back Sunday afternoon. But thank God, they were like, hey, man, you drove these first two shows. How about we fly you for this next one? Like, thank you. That's always good, man. It's outside of like the California area. It's like I've been able to go to every corner of the U.S. And if I ever get my like personal life and home life to where it's not hanging by a thread, which it's all good. I don't mean it like that. It's like I would like to get a passport and wrestle out of the country, but it's like I've got a wife and daughter, and it's like as soon as I go somewhere out of town, calamity happens. So it's like one day I would love to wrestle internationally before I hang it up.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on with us, and thanks for chatting.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm long-winded because I love wrestling. Some days I wish I fell in love with literally like any other type of aspect of entertainment or hobby or whatever, or career choice, for God's sake. But it's who
Don't
I am.
Apologize to us, man. That's what we do. We just get on and bullshit about wrestling for an hour or so.
Yeah, this whole damn podcast is long-winded. So yeah, you fit right
Hell
in.
Yeah.
It fit right in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, thanks again, and looking forward to seeing you. I'm especially excited about the Trash Panda show. I saw that. I guess it was via your info or via the New South stuff that there was going to be an event there at the Trash Panda Stadium. It didn't occur to me that it might be before a game, so that's even more exciting.
Yeah, it'll be before the game in the concourse.
Hell yeah! Oh my God, that's going to be fun. But yeah, well, I'll definitely be there, and I believe there's another Huntsville one announced for Shag Nasties, I believe.
Oh gosh, I can't keep up with it. I've heard of it. I've heard of that one. I don't know exactly when it is. I think it's beyond what I have my sights in. I gotta get through these next 20 dates first.
I hear you. Well, thanks again, and thanks to everybody for listening in. And be sure to follow us if you don't already on Twitter and Instagram at Alabama Slam Pod, and then we're also on Facebook. You can find us the Alabama Slam Podcast, and we'll see y'all next week.
Later, guys.